you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
Okay, so first up, we'll go with Jane Alcorn. Jane is the founder and past board president at the Tesla Science Center, with a background including degrees and experience in education. Creating a science learning center is one of her priorities, and acknowledging Tesla's contributions to modern society and science are a part of that passion.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and I'm looking forward to speaking with the rest of the panelists.
Amen. For many years, Gary Peterson has pursued independent research into the Tesla world wireless system, AC electric power systems, engineering, and wireless transmission. Gary was the chief operating officer of Tesla Wardenclyffe project. Please welcome Mr. Gary Peterson.
Thank everybody for being here, and thank you, Dave, or John, I guess, for inviting me, and look forward to participating in this conference.
He was the New Yorker Hotel chief engineer from 1996 to 2017. And Tesla died in 43, but Joe is kind of the closest thing we have to a line of continuity tracing Nikola Tesla as he lived his last 10 years at the New Yorker Hotel. And I'm very proud to introduce Mr. Joe Kinney.
I could say that being there, say, roughly 20 years, and about once a week, someone would be visiting the hotel for the purpose of learning about Tesla. I was able to meet a whole bunch of people from all kinds of backgrounds and interests and ages and nationalities. So I learned a smidgen about Tesla every time someone visited. And I just tried to get out of the way and let them have access.
Marc Seifer is a best-selling author. It's called Wizard, The Life and Times of Nikola Tesla, Biography of a Genius.
This is a biography that I wrote 20 years ago, and it's available in audio and as a physical book. It's a best-selling #1 Amazon book. And the other book, Tesla, Wizard at War, which is essentially a sequel of sorts. In it, I cover 3 major wars that Tesla was involved with: the Spanish-American War, World War I, where Tesla was working for Telefunken, the German wireless company, and also working for the US Navy in legal battles against Marconi. And then in World War II, which I'm sure we'll talk about, which has a lot to do with your very fine movie on the particle beam weapon and high frequency phenomena.
We were pitched an idea by our director, and this is basically the story of Final Frequency. He pitched us a hook and a story about what if Nikola Tesla had a secret notebook and it fell into the wrong hands. Now that right there, hooked me. And I'm like, okay, so we dive into this and we find out about the sonic weapons and the Havana syndrome and the Cuba attacks and active denial, which is essentially a microwave force field that, you can wall off. We've seen many things that, essentially have precipitated from Tesla's inventions. What really caused Tesla's financial troubles? And, there's some controversy, which I just learned about yesterday when I read Gary's treatise about, was he really penniless? What's the answer?
It's very complicated. Tesla had a lot of patents, so a lot of money was coming in through his worldwide patents. He had about 300 worldwide patents. 100 of them are fundamental. So if you ask how many inventions based on his patents, about 100, but he had them all over the world. But his real financial problem happened at Wardenclyffe. And that's really, what I deal with in, the Life and Times of Nikola Tesla. his whole life, but I really focused in major part is why did Wardenclyffe fail? And ultimately Wardenclyffe failed because he ran out of money. And a reason that he ran out of money was he built a larger tower than he had agreed upon with JP Morgan, who was his backer. This was in 1901, and Tesla was building this gigantic wireless transmitter. His plan was, multiple, but one of the main plans was exactly what we have right here, would be a world communication system. At that time, he was figuring basically what we're calling cell phones, where every single person would have the ability by means of wireless to speak to each other. And he was telling Morgan, I need more money. And when I complete this, my tower, a person in Australia will be talking to you as if he's talking right across the table. I personally have had multiple conversations, with China, England, the West Coast and the East Coast, all at the same time. And that was basically Tesla's vision. So in terms of the money, he put another 50,000 of his own money into it. He raised money from friends and from family members, and also he had some holdings, which he sold. So after that, he really was, I wouldn't say he was penniless, but he was broke. Then around World War I, he formed a partnership with Telefunken. They had two huge towers, one in New Jersey called Tuckerton, and Sayville out on Long Island. And he was getting royalties from Tuckerton and probably from Sayville as well. I proved that he was getting 5% of gross receipts from Tuckerton. It was the second tallest building in the world. It was 800 feet tall. So this is around 1914, 1915, 1916. And then World War II takes place, and the Germans cut the cable, the transatlantic cable. So wireless became very important. And then Marconi sued America, sued the US Navy, because Navy was actually had German Telefunken wireless transmitters on their ships. So this was a big problem. And so Tesla lost out because of the First World War. Had the First World War not happened, he might have had the money actually to go back and resurrect Wardenclyffe. It was that lucrative a deal that he had with Telefunken, the German company. But then after that, he was pretty much broke because it cost a lot of money to build his turbines. The tower came down in 1917. And then from the 1920s all the way through the 30s, he stopped paying rent to a lot of these hotels. And finally, in 1933 or thereabouts, Hugo Gernsback and Tesla basically shamed the Westinghouse company because they had the Westinghouse Broadcasting Company, and they agreed to cover Tesla's rent at the Hotel New Yorker. So he basically lived rent-free for the last 10 years of his life. But money was a huge problem. He always joked that as it came in, he shoved it out the window as it came through the front door. So to answer your question, money was a big problem, but throughout the 1890s, he was equivalent to a multimillionaire through the early 1900s. And then once he overspent at Wardenclyffe and he couldn't get the additional financing beyond the 150,000 that Morgan promised him, he was sunk, and Morgan blocked access that Tesla had to other, they were in today's dollars billionaires. Jacob Schiff, Henry Clay Frick, Thomas Fortune Ryan. Each of those people in those days was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't know how you calculate that today, but they were all billionaires. And every time they met with Morgan, Morgan stopped them. And so the question is, why did Morgan stop these men from helping Tesla complete the tower? And one of the answers was that Morgan was afraid of a wireless system because it threatened his copper mines, it threatened his rubber plantations, it threatened his lumber yards. He was afraid of this new technology. He didn't realize, and Tesla did realize, that once radio came in, it created so many multimillionaires in so many ways, but mostly through advertising. So Morgan it was before it all happened. And so that's really the sad story of Tesla's financial situation.
I'd like to add that I know Yugoslavia provided a small pension to him during his later years as well, which was, I'm sure, helpful to him in his day-to-day expenses. And also having met his grandnephew, William Turbo, Bill told me that when he was a boy, he and his mother went to visit Uncle Nikola, and his father was Tesla's nephew. And Bill said that they were there on family business, which really meant that his mother was checking up on Nikola Tesla to see if he had adequate funds. And that was one of the reasons they were visiting. So I know he had a little bit of help from his family, but money was always a problem.
Yeah, one of the stories that Bill Turbo tells is when they visited Tesla, there was an upcharge if you got there before 3 o'clock. If you waited till 3 o'clock, if you go into the restaurant, you wouldn't have to pay this upcharge, which in those days, $5 was equivalent to about maybe $50, $75 today. So it was a $5 upcharge. And Tesla just walked right in. He didn't care. And so Turbo's father, who was Tesla's nephew, had to pay this additional upcharge. So Tesla was very frivolous when it came to spending. That was part of the problem as well. Unfortunately, as Jane, of course, knows, we all know, Bill just died last year. He was 88 years old, and he was probably the last person to have seen Tesla in reality. I interviewed a number of people who knew Tesla in Wizard, but I think there may be somebody out there, but for all intents and purposes, I don't know if there's anybody today alive that knew Tesla. But again, he had a stream of income from his patents, but he had a tremendous overhead. He had his office, he had his laboratory, he had his hotel bills, and he had the machinery he had to build. And we all know the development costs when he was building the turbines in the teens and the 1920s. It takes a tremendous outlay of funds, and then something goes wrong. The ball bearings aren't working. You need new ball bearings, and you got to come up with another $5,000 or $10,000. J.P. Morgan Jr. Gave Tesla about $25,000 towards the turbines during the time of World War I. So he was constantly getting money from very wealthy individuals, but his overhead was tremendous.
And I don't think he was all that careful how he spent it either.
Yeah, and of course there were a lot of debts that he had, like Marc pointed out, or expenses, I should say. And he had certainly sources of income all during his heydays. But at some point, I imagine he started economizing a little bit. He didn't have expenses associated with manufacturing his inventions in his later years, and it appears that he was pretty much had a cash economy. So it was, who knows? It's in my mind, it would be very difficult to really know how much cash he had on hand in his later years.
Okay, well, I guess, Joe, is there any records or any connection to the New Yorker?
I have a copy of a letter from Westinghouse guaranteeing him a stipend of like $70-something a month during his time at the New Yorker. And we see there's one other thing. Oh no. Yeah, that was a concrete thing. And as Jane said, quite a few of the Eastern European visitors mentioned about him getting a stipend from the government. And I have a letter from the IEEE trying to get some kind of financial support developed for him in about 1942, or just really in the final months of his life, saying he was basically starving. And this is on like an IEEE stationery. And saying he was virtually starving and they needed to get some fund together. Then there's a subsequent letter that says, well, it's too late, he's died. It's about, I have those two documents.
If you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.